Hi everyone, I'm Tony Craddock. I'm the Director General of the Emerging Payments Association, and this is the monthly Insights interview, where it's a chance for me to chat to one of the industry's thought-shaping, industry-leading, opinion-making industry executives who will share some thoughts about them, their business, and their views on the industry. And I'm delighted and excited to be welcoming to you today the CEO and co-founder of Chargebacks 911. And Gary is a serial international entrepreneur. He's been involved with gas and power businesses. And now he's in a business that removes the friction from credit card fraud. And he is addressing the mounting problem of disputes in the fraud industry worth $300 billion. So he's an important guy, and a very big welcome to you, Gary. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Tony. Good to see you. I wish we were in a pub in England somewhere having this conversation, but we're doing the best we can.
So do I. So look, Gary.
Unfortunately, I'm in beautiful Tampa right now with too much heat, so apologies for the T-shirt.
You're in Tampa, Georgia, and I'm in downtown London. It's lunchtime with you. It's evening here, but who knows? We are where we are. So great. So look, Gary, whenever anybody meets you, they know you're a guy who has drive. So what is there in your past or your present that perhaps has motivated you to be who you are?
Oh, that's a big one. It's funny. I just have been reading 2 or 3 books, and it was talking about really very, very successful people. And one of the common themes seems to be in this century that there's an awful lot of really, really, really successful people who have, dynamically changed complete industries, many of which, in fact, at least half, stopped going to school, formal education. And coupled with that, they all their lives seem to have some trauma in their background. I mean, if you really dig, Elon Musk does not talk about having an awesome childhood, and I think it goes on and on and on when you talk about these stories. My honest answer, because people have asked me this before: fear, guilt, and insecurity. And no one in business ever talks about that. They talk about, well, I want to help the world. And that's awesome. I do want to help the world. But I have noticed my whole life, whether it was 18, 22, 28, 30, running the company, working for a guy in the company, I would always show up a little bit early and stay a little bit late, not because I was this workhorse, but because I think that's what my boss would want me to do. And I definitely know that's what my dad wanted me to do my dad died when I was really young, but my twin brother and I would go out and work in the yard with him. And Grant and I are both relatively successful, relative to the rest of the planet, thank God. And we both talk about being completely confounded when we were 8 years old, because my father knew how to work. He knew how to pick up a rake and use it. And we were so messy. I'm watching my kids go through this right now.
Yeah.
No structure, no organization. So my answer really is, part of it is I want to be a productive member of society. When Monica got pregnant, she came home one afternoon. I was completely unemployed. I was fortunate enough to help build a business and left England at 42 years old, and I was done. By the way, big mistake. Would never recommend anyone at 70 retire. If you're enjoying what you're doing, you should keep doing it.
Cool.
It was not good for me to unplug intellectually, but I was done with the business. I just was no longer enjoying it. And I have been one that I'm not going to chase the money. I will not have anything trap me. It's been one of my major goals since I was 16, not to get trapped in the material universe. But when Monica told me she was pregnant, I was I gave her a big hug. I was really excited. I was really, really, really excited.
Yeah.
The next comment I made was, man, I got to go find a job. I mean, literally, I said, well, I got to go find a job. And she's like, wow. I'm like, we can't have our kid walking around the house, crawling around the house, seeing their dad and their mom not do anything, smoke cigars and trade stocks. That is not a productive message. So some of this is born out of obligation and look, God gave me, or whatever the universe you believe in. I think I have at least 1 or 2 minor gifts and not to use those, like, to me is not a good thing.
Yeah, brilliant.
So if I can set an example, I don't have a Harvard education. I didn't go to MIT. I have people that work for me that went to those places, which I think is awesome. But I think, I have an obligation to set an example. If for no other reason, one person who wasn't fortunate enough to go to a great school, and they can go, hey, that cat actually makes a decent living. He worked in 4 industries and was able to survive without surrendering his own personality, which has been important to me. So, look, without a game, I get in trouble. And I become bored, I get in trouble. And I think you and I share that a bit in common.
Absolutely.
We need something to do.
Absolutely.
So that's my answer, Tony. I don't know if that's
it's a great answer, and what is clear from your success at Chargebacks 911 that the doing has worked. But you've seen a lot of change, I imagine, since you set it up a few years ago, and I know the audience will be interested to see your observations, bearing in mind the journey you've taken, as to what changes you've seen in payments and in our community over the years.
Well, I can't remember exactly. I'm thinking of a person that I met in London that was from a very large acquiring bank. And I moved to London, before we moved to London in 2016, because part of our journey was, hey, we want to be an international business. You're not going to do it from America. We're just going to tell all Americans, if you want to do business in Europe, grow some cojones and move to Europe. And don't do the Monday to Thursday. The Europeans know it. They don't like it. They'll happy to suck information from you, but they want to see commitment on the ground. So we went to London, but before that, I spent a year in London doing research, R&D, what military people call reconnaissance. And I met a guy that worked at a very large acquiring bank that's probably around your age, maybe a little older. He's been in acquiring for a century, and 4 meetings I had with him, and he constantly told me, hey, no way, no one will ever make money from chargebacks. It's the dumbest idea in the history of mankind. And I was reminded of this idea about, they call you bad, when Jesus has a new idea and they want to kill him, and they say, no. And then people come around and go, hey, actually, this isn't a bad idea. And then a decade later, it becomes the norm.
Yeah.
I think the payments industry is under so much stress right now that if one were to look, I'm an outsider. So when you guys hold me responsible for being aggressive, and I am an outsider in a very, very large, antiquated, with all due respect, archaic industry. And that would be true, in my opinion, of every 20th century construct. So I'm not, blaming anybody. We are where we are because this is how we got here. Like, a lot of people don't use coal anymore, okay, in Western civilizations. But there was a time when our countries depended on using coal.
So payments is archaic. So what are the changes that you're seeing?
Well, I'm seeing first, the point I was trying to get to, I think people are waking up. I think we're in the wake up phase. Unfortunately, everybody needs to kind of come to conscious level immediately because we keep acting. My experience in the last 9 years has been people use excuses for the inefficiencies in payments instead of confronting that there is a massive leakage issue in payments. When you have close to $500 billion in declines, refunds that every retailer will tell you, I am dying from returns. And most of them, a good 40% of them, are fraudulent. Consumer had no intention on buying.
Yeah.
And then we bring up the chargeback, which is the last big piece, which is, I read a document the other day suggesting there's going to be 400 million chargeback events between America and Europe in 2023. 400 million. That's in addition to the declines. Just in that little space, right? I look at that and go, if that was Bitcoin, it would be under Department of Justice investigation.
It's broken.
It's so broken. And so I see people starting to wake up. The mega mergers have really lit everyone up. And then you have the crypto world, and you have Federal Reserves, the IMF, major banking institutions, both sovereign and private, all moving into the digital world. So we are undergoing a tsunami of change I don't think the planet's ever seen. And I don't think you can be Barclays, HSBC, you can be Alibaba, Ant, anyone on any continent, unless you just built something yesterday, you're going to be stressing with all the legacy baggage you're carrying around. I mean, this new market is designed for speedboats and Navy SEAL boats, like in and out. I mean, I saw an interview by Klarna the other day. I thought the guy was brilliant. He said, look, we're not taking any money from people that think we can do this in 6 months. You don't change and transform multi-trillion-dollar markets in a quarter.
Yeah.
So I think the private companies are in a real, we're a private company for a reason, because it allows me to take tactical, longer-term strategy decisions and not worry about what it's doing to my quarter. Otherwise, I would have never gone to London.
Yeah, brilliant.
But it's a conundrum, right? Because when you're a public company and you have 22-year-old analysts at Goldman Sachs asking you questions, and they're asking 32 other people the same questions, and there's four consulting firms on the planet that basically advise all these companies. I mean, someone asked me one day, they said, hey, how can you move from natural gas to government work to electricity to real estate and then payments? And be successful in have a modicum of success in all of those. I mean, the first two were monsters.
Yeah.
And the answer is I'm at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And I'm good with change, but it's a lot easier for me to make that change than a big legacy player. They have just so much weight to carry around.
I think many of the people listening to this interview will be delighted to hear that, because they are part of the progressive, entrepreneurial, innovative payments community that the EPA represents. And so when you're sitting there and you're in Tampa, Georgia, and you're thinking, let's focus on the big chances, what would you say are the sort of top 3 opportunities in our industry right now?
That's the third question, right?
Yep.
The top 3. Wow. Sorry to be difficult, but I think it depends on who you are. If you're a large private equity firm like Blackstone, or KKR, Advent Bain, et cetera, General Atlantic, man, the opportunities are there's debt consolidation, there's buyouts, there's companies are going to get blown up, they're going to do restructurings, and then they can also look at the fintechs, these innovative new companies that don't have legacy and they're solving problems. I think many of these fintechs are what I call small Trojan horses, and they're using an expertise, and this is exactly what we have always done. We use an expertise to wiggle into the payments system, and we become an instrumental part of that system, providing a built-for-purpose solution, technology, whatever, but it's focused on solving a problem. And then once you get your feet under, you then start solving other problems. For us, I could buy 10 companies tomorrow morning. Okay. Now, managing all that acquisition is a challenge. It's a different business, and it would hurt Chargebacks 911 because we have so much to focus on right now. But I think it really depends on where you are in the food chain or what the opportunities are. I think one of the greatest opportunities for big banks, and I was hoping you were actually going to say that the big banks would actually like what I'm saying, because the big banks, to me, the first thing they have to do is really define, hey, what is it we do?
Yeah.
And saying that I'm 300 years old bank is not what you do. That is not, dinosaurs said that once too. And then they're no longer here. So I think, really depend. If I'm a big bank, I'm going to spend 20% of my time on culture. And then I'm going to take my balance sheet and I'm going to use it in the most aggressive way that I've ever used it before.
Yeah.
And basically, I've been a little surprised that the card schemes haven't bought more. People complain about how much they're buying. I think they're going to buy everything that moves.
What do you think Alibaba is going to do, or Ant Financial is going to do with its $36 billion?
Well, the Asian market is far larger than the market that we think that we're such a big player of. It's in the 20s of trillions, and we're in the threes. So if I am a Western financial institution, I have about 7 great fears, and Ant Financial is right on the top of that list. Because I think the future is not about, hey, Barclays is competing with UBS. I think you're going to be competing with Ant. You're going to be competing with software companies, big monster software companies that could buy any of these companies at a 30% premium with cash, and they don't. So it's very interesting that. So I think for the software companies, Microsoft, fraud software, the tax companies like Avalara, some of the new acquiring banks. And maybe some of the guys that have done this, big mega acquiring piece. Look, I think this thing is so dynamic. This is like being in the middle of a tsunami with, in the middle of 5 earthquakes occurring at one time. But there are going to be shock waves.
So a bit scary, hugely exciting, lots of opportunity, which you've just been talking about. So what are the obstacles then that might stop people from realizing those opportunities? What are the things that's going to get in the way and stop them?
Well, you say it's scary. See, I wonder, is it really scary? I think initially, look, I've been through this 4 times now, okay, in 2 countries, 4 times when I'm in an industry and it goes through a major disruption. Like, I'm going to write a book, and it's going to be really interesting. It's not about what I did. It's about like, hey, I was just happened to be at the right place when some change occurred. And I was bright enough to see it go, oh, wow, that's interesting. Well, why are they doing that? That seems weird. Well, it didn't seem weird when you started, okay, 30 years ago. I think if you look at the opportunities, I mean, look, you asked me a question, I didn't fully get it. Payments. School and education is going to be majorly disrupted. Okay. School and education is a big deal for me. I would love to be, you could have 1,000 companies disrupting the education system, and they all be billion-dollar businesses. It's that big. Cryptocurrency, very few people, they get into this fear thing and go, I don't want to know it. Like, you better know it, okay, because it's coming. Oil, gas, power, these industries are changing radically. I mean, radically, right? It's not one. It's not just finances. It's not just credit cards. The entire construct that happened before the 20th century is being greatly challenged. Residential homing, how people live places, ride sharing, EVs. So to me, it's really, really, really exciting, right?
Yeah.
If you're able to stay in front of it and not get crushed, I think the great risk, you said, hey, what's the biggest problem? It's what I call the glittery object syndrome. That everybody's doing this, and if you don't really know what your core business is, like we really know what our core business is. Like, we don't go into gateways, and I could have bought, like, this is the reason I formed Card One Ventures. We passed on like 27 deals in the last 3 years because I knew that if I bought that into the company, it would mess the company. So I formed Card One so I could do M&A for CB 911, but also when I popped around and saw, like, I invested in the Nuvei IPO. I should have been doing this for a long time. I can invest in the Nuvei IPO under Card One Ventures. It has nothing to do with chargebacks 911, right?
So it's about focus.
Focus.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because you just have so much going on.
By the way, I love you being the archetypal American drinking a can of Coke. It's just absolutely bang on message.
Breakfast of champions.
Magic.
Coca-Cola, you owe me a royalty now, please.
So look, I always think you're very driven, very strong-minded, but you're also a big family man. A couple of questions, if you don't mind, about your family and your family life. I want to ask about your kids in a minute. But,
you mean these guys back here?
Yeah, I know. What an amazing, good-looking family you got. So, so first of all, you're married to your business partner. She's an extraordinary woman. She's a force to be reckoned with. She's award-winning. She's done some great things. What's that like being in partnership, both in business and a home?
What's it like?
Yeah. How do you manage it?
I'm not sure. It's a challenge, I'll tell you. Look, I think, I don't actually know the answer to that because it is really, really challenging. The business today, had we known the business was going to be this big, I'm not a big believer. Let me just be really honest. I'm not a big believer in family-run businesses. And the reason is some people find this really weird that I actually say this because I'm in one. By the way, me and my brother, completely separate businesses. I invest with him passively, nothing to do with his business at all. Zero.
Interesting.
He has nothing to do with my business. He has not one penny in my business. He doesn't tell me what to do. He has no vote, nothing. So just because everybody thinks we're funding each other, and it's like, whatever. But because I actually don't think two people can drive the same ship without wrecking it. So I have not seen in 30 years a lot of family-run businesses that are big. And I love building big businesses. I just don't. I think old man told me a long time ago, dude, it's just another zero. So if you can do it 10 times, doing it 10,000, it's just zeros. And it's like, oh, I can understand that. I'm from Louisiana. I got it.
Yeah.
So she is brilliant. The challenge with the family and being a parent and running a global business, like you have to just look at things a little differently. Like we travel a lot on private planes and people laugh at us, but it's like, hey, try to live my life without that. So I'm very interested in the way I live and who I am. I'm not interested in chasing money and having all this stuff stocked up in a bunch of homes. We don't have any of that. And what I'm really interested in is that our kids can come and go with us.
Yes. They're wonderful.
It's look, she's a brilliant person. We happen to be also married, creates some, challenges for us. The biggest problem is that, when you go home, it's hard to turn the work off.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because you've been working in Florida and keeping to UK time. So you're all up really, really early and, changes.
And it's other little things like this. I mean, it's not a little thing. If we didn't have children, it wouldn't have this issue. But for instance, we have a big business in London. If we weren't married, I would be living in Mayfair and she would be here.
Yeah.
And I would be running revenue in Europe and she would be over here running the operations. But because we're married, we want to make that. And so it creates some issues and it's not perfect. But the truth is, I've never seen an organization that's perfect.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what,
Shell Oil hasn't figured it out either.
You're quite right. And I'll tell you what I love is your business really works and it's great seeing you two together. So the final question I've got for you, Gary. So you've got a couple of kids. How old are they?
10 and 13.
Okay. So they're just sort of early stage teenagers. What would you say to anyone considering a career in our industry, whether it's your daughters or others? What would your advice be? Somebody thinking about a career in payments.
If I'm 10 or 13, I'm probably not going to tell them what to do because I think any advice I would give a 10 or 13-year-old, the speed of change that is occurring on this planet, the only thing I could probably tell them to do that would be awesome would go into rockets. I mean, someone asked me recently, hey, two businesses, what do you want to go into? And my answer was rockets, space travel, and credit card financial transactions. I will never be able to afford going into rockets ever.
Yeah.
So that's now a new, trillionaire's game.
Yeah.
I love it, by the way. I think it's great for this planet. But for anyone that's 22 and above, 50 years old, if you're in payments, man, I have heard this so many times recently. I'm in payments. I'm thinking about leaving. Wrong decision. Like the payments industry I could be there's a lot of stuff I could do. This is the most exciting industry other than space travel that I know of that any person can get into. You do not need billions of dollars. Like, we'll hire a ton of people here.
Yeah.
You don't even need to get paid necessarily. What you need to do is get a job. Everybody worries about, I need 200 grand. Like, dude, right now you need a job. There's going to be a lot of layoffs in this industry. And I think people are really not understanding what's getting ready to happen. And this industry is bloated with generalists. Bloated, absolutely chock-a-block bloated with people that can't even explain the process of a transaction. That's not healthy.
No, exactly.
I mean, Peter Bailey asked me once, hey, what do you think the biggest problem in the payments industry and fraud is? And my answer was, I think you have 32,000 people walking around acting like experts, pretending to be experts.
Yeah.
And he agreed. Sorry,
Yeah.
Peter, I blew you, but there's too many people that, and I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
Like, he thinks I am, but I'm not. Not like, I might look at things and be able to build a business from 20,000 feet, but Monica is an expert. Tracy Cray's an expert. Andrea Nolan, expert.
Yeah.
Peter Bailey, expert. So Johan Gerber, expert. Now they also have issues, right? So that, I think you have 12 years. It's probably, last time we had lunch, if I was 35 years old, I think I could build 2 multi-billion-dollar businesses in the next 10 years. Like, it would be so easy to do. So I think it's just about hard work. Don't raise too much money. Don't let debt get you out of control. You don't need all that stuff. And then now for my kids, like, my kids don't go to formal schools. If I have anything to do with it, they never will go to a formal school. And they need to know how to communicate, receive information, and give information in an articulate manner. They need to be able to do general math, not trigonometry, general math. Hey, what's 10% of $180,000? Because that's the interest rate.
Yeah.
What does compounding mean? And I asked 30 CEOs of large companies, if I had an 18-year-old kid that traveled all around the world with their entrepreneurial parents, they could communicate well and they could do general math, would they give them an interview? 30 out of 30 said yes. I did not ask for a job. I asked for an interview.
Yeah.
If my kids get an interview, they can decide whether they get their job or not.
Brilliant.
And then they get to decide whether they get to keep it or not.
Yeah,
right?
Brilliant. Gary, thank you so much. It's great for you to have been so open with us. And I know what you're like. That will have been exactly how it is for you. So I know that the audience who's listening into this will have benefited enormously from those little gems, those little nuggets of kind of wisdom, I suppose, but built on a lifetime of experience of being an adventurer and being out there. And I admire you, and I think you're brilliant. And hang in there and keep on setting a good example to the rest of the industry. Gary
Thanks, Tony. Great to see you. Keep up the work, buddy. You're doing an awesome job.
Thanks.
Really, the EPA has changed. It has changed so much. Like, it's really cool. So awesome job to you and your team.
Thanks, Gary, for your time.
All right, man. Ciao.